You've got a 1 in 2 chance of asking a board member if you talk to somebody. So just keep trying, and they'd be glad to show you around and tell you about what our little dealie is here and the Kerouac House and what we do. And the main thing that we do is we host 4 residency a year, and it's very competitive getting a residency here, and they get to live in the house and they can sleep in any room they want. It's very exciting, and we give them a stipend so they don't have any worries about what they're going to eat tomorrow, starving artist stuff. And we leave them alone to write, and then we ask how much they'd like to interact with the community, and they're welcome to do things with the community if they want to. And Shasta's been very good about that. She's come from Singapore to be with us and left her son and husband behind and has spent 3 months with us, which has rocketed by. And everybody comes with dreams, and her dream was to write a draft of a novel, and she is a focused lady because she did it. So she has a draft to go home with. Yay! It's a rarity, Shasta. You don't know. You don't know how rare that is. And she's going to give us a reading from that. And she has also learned how to be a jigsaw puzzle person here. Which we're very proud when we can add extra skills to our. She had no time to do that with her son and her husband and what's for dinner and all that stuff, but she actually found time to do literary jigsaw puzzles. So we're very, very happy that she's picked up that skill. We've had people bring their quilting with them, and we had people doing advanced yoga, and people, you have to do something for 3 months. You can't write all the time, can you? No, you can't. People think they can, but it's not really possible. So that's where the jigsaw puzzles come in. Awesome. Well, we're going to have Shasta come up and read to us.
I'm going to read an excerpt from the novel that I've been working on here, and then I'm going to read 2 flash fiction pieces from a chapbook that I have coming out this summer. So the novel excerpt, it's not from the very beginning, but it's from early on, and I don't think it needs any kind of explanation. And the novel is currently titleless. Sorry about that. Okay. When I was 10 years old, I watched my mother pack up her things, bottles of Jean Naté, jeans and sweaters, the good frying pan and the blender we never used, and shove off. I sat on the scratchy sofa my parents got from the side of the road somewhere and watched her pack the things that mattered most to her. A blanket was piled on the sofa from where she slept the night before, and I wrapped myself up in it, inhaling her cigarette smell. She smoked Newport menthols, and there was always a green pack in her purse, on the counter, on the dashboard of her car. My father wouldn't come out of their bedroom. I remembered all the details from that day because it was the day that marked before and after. If she'd come back like all the other times, I probably wouldn't remember much of anything. I wouldn't remember how her hair was still wet from the shower and left splotches on the back of her t-shirt. It was an old t-shirt that used to belong to my father, a faded black, nearly gray, with the Ruger logo on the front. She wore her favorite blue jeans, tight around the ankle, and black boots. The only makeup she had on was a bit of shiny lip gloss. She walked around the trailer, moving from one end to the other quickly, filling Crown Royal boxes from the liquor store. There were at least 6 boxes. Then she loaded them one by one in her rusty Chevy Nova. Once she took the final box out to her car, I followed her to the front door, the blanket wrapped around my shoulders, and stood there, kicking the screen door with my foot in the way I knew she hated, letting it bang against the door frame. The only thing I can't remember from that day is what, if anything, she said to me when she left. Or maybe I don't want to remember what she said. Surely she would have said something before walking out on me like that. Some apology or explanation, or maybe some reassurance that she'd be back soon or in a little while. At the very least, she could have left with some kind of life instruction to take with me in her absence, some platitude like, "do well in school." But I don't remember any words exchanged between us that morning. I don't remember her even acknowledging my presence in the living room. It was as if the menthol-scented blanket was a cloak of invisibility. She started the car, the engine groaning to life. For a split second, I thought her car wouldn't start and she wouldn't go. She'd be forced to unload all the boxes, and I'd help her, and we'd get a good laugh out of the whole thing. But the car did start, and she backed out onto the road. I listened to the rattle of her muffler fade down Cherry Street. Then I locked the screen door, slipping the hook into the metal loop. I went into the kitchen, thinking maybe if I just went about my day like usual, it would end up being an ordinary day after all. I poured myself some off-brand Apple Jacks. The milk was sour, but I ate it anyway. My father came out and poured a bowl of cereal, too. We stood side by side at the counter and ate, the only sound, the crunching of the cereal. The night before, my parents got in a big fight, which wasn't unusual, but this one ended in silence, which was. She'd taken off a couple of times before, but always came back before I got home from school the next day. And those times, she'd just thrown a few things into a bag. She didn't have boxes. I'd come home and find her emptying grocery bags on the counter, acting as if nothing happened, as if she'd just made an overnight trip to the grocery store, as if that was completely normal. This time was different, and I should have known it right away. The way my dad acted as if she was gone for good, when all the other times he'd planned for her expected return, setting the table for 3 or putting her clothes in the washing machine. But I didn't know it right away. I thought it was like all the other times. I thought she'd be back, because that's what mothers did. They always came back. That afternoon, my dad brought me over to my best friend Sarah's house to spend the night. It was my first sleepover. Sarah's too. It hadn't been planned beforehand. If it had, Sarah and I would likely have spent all week passing notes to each other in class, planning out everything we would do at her house, giddy with excitement. I'm not sure how it even came about, whether my dad called Sarah's mom or she called him. My dad must have told Mrs. Roberts about my mother taking off that morning, but nobody mentioned it, and I just pretended everything was fine, something I was good at. I was actually pretty excited about spending the night. I figured my mother would be back by the time I got home the next morning. My dad drove me over to her house, and Mrs. Roberts came out the front door and walked up to his truck. He didn't get out, just rolled the window down and shook her hand. I opened the passenger side door, grabbed my backpack, and hopped down onto the gravel driveway. Sarah was standing in the doorway and motioned for me to come inside. I waved to my dad and disappeared in the house while Sarah's mother stayed and talked to my father. Sarah's father was the Reverend at All Saints Episcopal Church on North Street, near the center of town. His name was painted in a fancy gold script on the sign outside the stone church, the Reverend Michael Roberts. They lived in the parsonage behind the church, a 2-story white house with a front door the same shade of red as the church door. I thought they were rich because they lived in such a big house. I didn't know then that it belonged to the church, but really, compared to my family, they were rich, whether they owned that house or not. Sarah and I went straight to her room, and I dropped my bag on the floor. Her bedroom had a double bed, a huge closet, and a Jack and Jill bathroom that led to her younger sister Ruth's bedroom. Sarah had a trundle bed too, which was something I had always loved. I loved the way the small bed slid out from beneath Sarah's bed and then slid back in like a hidden world. Every time I went to her house, I made her pull the trundle out to show me, and I could tell that it filled her with pride to present the bed to me. This was the first time I actually got to sleep on it. If anyone were to ever sleep at my house, which rarely happened even in the coming years, the choices were to squish into my twin bed together or sleep on the floor. Her bed and the trundle bed had matching pink quilts that her grandmother made. Ruth's bed had a purple quilt in the same starburst pattern. My bed was covered in my parents' old comforter, blue and tan stripes. It was so big that the fabric pooled at both sides of the bed. Mrs. Roberts made a big dinner that night, and I thought at first it was because I was there, but I soon learned they ate like that every night. Chicken or roast beef, mashed potatoes or baked potatoes, carrots or green beans, and always those rolls from that can that popped open when you twist it. My mother wore an apron. Her mother wore an apron when she cooked, one of half a dozen that hung on hooks on the wall. My mother didn't even own an apron. I remember thinking that tomorrow I would tell my mother about the apron collection, that she'd get a good laugh out of that. But I actually liked the aprons. When I watched Mrs. Roberts slip the apron over her head that day, a blue one with her name embroidered on it, I thought, I wish she was my mother. For a long time after, I worried that it was my silent wish that kept my own mother away, that somehow she knew I wanted a different mother than her, a better one. After dinner, Sarah and I helped load the dishwasher. Sarah had to show me how to do it because we didn't have a dishwasher at my house. We rinsed everything first and then placed the plates on the bottom rack, the glasses and bowls on the top, the silverware in the plastic basket. After we finished, her mother said we could watch television in the den, but there wasn't anything on that we wanted to watch, so we went back to her room. We'd been told lights out by 10 p.m., but Mrs. Roberts didn't come to check on us again after she said goodnight, kissing Sarah on the cheek and making an awkward movement to pat my head. We stayed up late talking about school. We talked about the upcoming softball tryouts and what positions we wanted to get, even though neither of us was very good. Mostly, I tried to avoid the ball. Until finally, around midnight, she said she needed to sleep. Otherwise, she'd fall asleep in church the next day, and then her mother would really be mad at her. I couldn't imagine Mrs. Roberts ever getting mad at her daughters. Not the way my mother sometimes flashed anger, the way it clouded over her face like a storm, usually passing as quickly as it came and seeming to startle her as much as me. Sarah's voice got a little funny after she said the word mother, but I thought maybe I just imagined it. She turned onto her side, facing the wall, and pulled her quilt over her shoulder, covering her floral print nightgown. It had a ruffled collar and lace around the hem. A few minutes later, I could hear a gentle snore. This would be our pattern for years, talking late into the night until Sarah decided it was time for sleep, her rolling over onto her side, the quiet snore. I never told her that she snored. I wondered if her husband eventually told her. Surely he must have, or maybe some man before him. Had there been other men before her husband? I never knew. Maybe she wouldn't believe him because of all those years I kept silent about it, when I fell asleep to her gentle trilling as if it were a lullaby meant just for me. Even though I was so excited about finally sleeping in the trundle bed, I had trouble falling asleep that first night. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed brightly, counting each minute as it passed by. Light from the church parking lot seeped in through Sarah's bedroom window. The tree outside moved in the wind, and the branches, combined with the light, formed monsters on the wall. Big, terrible things with gnashing teeth. The sounds at her house were different from mine, too. The way the refrigerator downstairs hummed to life at various times. The sound of her cat walking through the house, the little bell on its collar jingling. It moved from Sarah's room to Ruth's room throughout the night, jumping onto Sarah's bed and curling up for a while before jumping off and heading to Ruth's room through their shared bathroom. I would have loved for it to visit me, but it never did. It acted as if I wasn't there at all. I woke up in the middle of the night. The house was silent except for the soft snoring from Sarah above me in her bed. I had been dreaming about my mother, about a time we drove to Maine with the car windows rolled down. We both stuck our arms outside and let the wind flow through our fingers while we sang out loud to a tape of Carole King. As much as I loved Sarah's trundle bed, at that moment I wished she had only the one bed, so we would have had to sleep together. I wanted to push my back up against hers, to feel her there next to me. I didn't want to be alone. I closed my eyes and tried to get back into that dream, to feel the wind whipping through the windows of my mother's car, but I couldn't get there. I fell back asleep eventually and woke from a dreamless sleep to Sarah shaking my shoulder. "Get up, sleepyhead," she said. I rolled out of bed, tucking my old t-shirt down over my underwear, and was surprised to see Sarah all showered and dressed for church. She wore a polka dot sundress and a green sweater with pearl buttons. Her hair was still damp, parted neatly down the middle. I rubbed my eyes. I was kind of mad that she didn't wake me up when she got out of bed. I didn't like the feeling of being left behind or being late for something I didn't even know was happening. I pulled on my jeans from the day before, and we went to the kitchen, me in my makeshift pajamas, and Sarah in her church dress. Her mother made bowls of oatmeal topped with sliced strawberries and brown sugar for breakfast. Sarah braided her hair into 2 braids and secured each end with pink elastics while her mother stirred the oatmeal, and Ruth dressed and undressed a doll at the table. The doll had a little diaper, bloomers, a dress, tiny ruffled socks. I helped Ruth put the socks on, and then she slipped a pair of Mary Jane shoes on the doll and pronounced her ready for church. Looking back, I wondered, did they know then where my mother was? Had Mrs. Roberts talked to her that morning? Did she stand in the kitchen, the phone cradled between her ear and shoulder, and murmur advice to my mother while I slept in Sarah's trundle bed? As Mrs. Roberts sliced the strawberries and Sarah plaited her hair, were they keeping her from me even then? Which Sunday morning at their house was the first time they knew exactly where my mother was and didn't tell me? My dad picked me up at 8, just as Sarah and her mother and sister were about to walk next door to church. They were all ready to go, wearing their dresses and pretty shoes, Bibles gathered on the table near the front door. Her father had left before I woke up. Sarah said he always went over early on Sunday mornings to make sure everything was ready. She said there was actually a lot to do. I couldn't imagine what there was to do other than stand up and read the sermon, but I didn't know much about church. My dad left his truck running in their driveway as an excuse to not stay long, and probably also to not risk it not starting up again. It wasn't as if he and Mrs. Roberts had much to say to each other. He stood in the doorway while she held the door open. She didn't invite him inside. I picked up my backpack while they exchanged some words I couldn't hear. Once we were in the truck, he pushed the gear shift into reverse and backed out of the driveway. When we reached Main Street, he pulled a can of Skoal down from the dash, dipped his fingers in, and shoved a pinch of tobacco between his lips and gums. He kept an empty cup from 7-Eleven in the cup holder to spit into. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Fine," I said. I didn't tell him about the trundle bed or the monsters on Sarah's wall. "Did Mom come home?" I asked. "Nope," he said, spitting into the cup. "Maggie, I don't think she's coming back this time." He said it as plainly as if he was talking about some errand we needed to run on the way home, some videos we needed to return to the store before they were overdue. "Oh," I said. We didn't talk the rest of the way home. I stared out the window as we turned onto Country Club Drive and past the golf course on toward the trailer park. I never could understand why they put the golf course and the trailer park on the same road. Maybe somebody wanted us to have to drive by the expensive cars with their golf clubs stored in the trunk, watch the men in white pants walk along the perfectly manicured green grass. He turned onto Cherry Street, and I half hoped to see my mother's car as we approached our trailer. But of course, it wasn't there. I went straight to my room and closed the door. It seemed unbelievable that my mother wouldn't come back, that she would just take off like that with no explanation, that she wouldn't take me with her. There were plenty of kids in town whose fathers ran off, but nobody else whose mother disappeared. Mothers were supposed to stay. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to read 2 flash pieces from my chapbook, Gather Us Up and Bring Us Home. I have some postcards. They're back there. You're welcome to take a postcard. It's going to be available for pre-order on Monday through Split Lip Press, and the website for the publisher is on the back as well as my website, so you can click over there if you're keen to pre-order a copy. And Split Lip Press is doing a special promotion. All pre-orders are going to ship with a really cool sticker of the car from the cover. And if you don't like short stories, maybe you could take a postcard and send it to a friend who does like short stories. Okay. Real sports. Jared likes to hunt, and you mock complain with the other girls who call themselves hunting widows. You marvel at all the gear, the camouflage clothes, the orange vests, the bullets. Jared likes to show you the guns, the Winchester SX3 cantilever buck, the Browning A-bolt, the Mossberg 930 slugster. When he goes to the woods with his father, you stay behind and drink apple cider with his mother. The deer heads on the living room wall stare at you with vacant eyes. She tells you this is what it's like to be a baker woman, and you want to be a baker woman. Your own mother wouldn't sit around and wait for anyone, not even you. But you like it, how the light outside changes as your mug cools, how Mrs. Baker deftly assembles a casserole, the way she stacks wood in the fireplace. Even though you were only 16, you imagine getting married in this backyard, the lace veil that will trail behind you, the bouquet of sunflowers in your hands. Jared and his father return, an 8-point buck slung in the back of the red pickup truck. You and Jared have fucked in the cab of this truck, parked in the cemetery and behind the Legion, and sometimes when your curfew is near, on the side of the road. He turns you over, pressing your face into the vinyl seat. He drives you home, one hand on the wheel, the other hand holding yours. Jared and his father flip the tailgate down and pull the deer out, and you stare at its glorious antlers, its smooth coat of fur, and the small hole in its shoulder. Blood is matted to its body and smeared inside the truck bed. You expected more. Jared's mother gets her camera, and the men pose with the deer, holding it up by the antlers. She hands the camera to you and says it's your turn. You hold the camera close to your eye. The deer's tongue hangs out the side of its mouth. Jared and his father pose it like some kind of doll, cocking its head and limbs. His mother steps into the frame. She tucks the deer's tongue inside its mouth and wraps her arms around each of her men. Jared makes a thumbs up sign, and you take the shot, slightly out of focus. Then Jared and his father drag the buck to the garage where they hang it upside down by its feet. The deer has been cut and gutted, the area that used to safely house its heart and lungs and stomach now hollowed out. Jared says you should call it field dressing. You wonder what will happen to those organs they left behind in the woods. You think maybe the deer will blink its eyes and thrash its body, loosen itself from the hook. Jared tells you to stop being such a spoil sport, and you say you're sorry. Can't you see how much this moment means to Jared and his parents? Don't you want to be a baker woman? One day, you will make the casserole and build the fire. One day, you will wrap venison in butcher paper and stock the freezer. One day, you will say to a girl, "This is how it's done." You will go to the woods to find the missing organs, scoop them up in your hands, and eat them raw. You will emerge from the woods bloodied and victorious. Thank you. This final piece is called Us Girls. Not long after Erica's mother left, and Erica started wearing the wig that vaguely resembled the shoulder-length hair she used to have, her father planned a sleepover. He must have thought it would cheer her up, but he had no idea how cruel fifth-grade girls could be. We had no idea ourselves. Our mothers made lengthy phone calls discussing the sleepover and whether or not they should allow us girls to sleep at Erica's house with only her father at home. In the end, they all agreed, but we each received a warning. My own mother said, "Now if something unsavory happens, call home and I'll come get you." None of us knew it would be the last time we'd go to Erica's house. We were excited because we knew her dad kept a stack of Playboy magazines in the bottom right-hand drawer of his desk. At my house, we only had JCPenney catalogs. I stared at them in my bedroom with the door closed, looking for nipples behind lace bras. Erica's father ordered pizza for dinner. The kitchen, which had been her mother's domain, contained little food. We piled onto the sofa to watch Poltergeist with bags of microwave popcorn on our laps. Her father stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jeans, looking at us or at the TV screen, until Erica rolled her eyes and told him to go away. After the movie, which scared none of us, we went upstairs to Erica's bedroom. We made her sneak across the hall into her father's office to retrieve the magazines. We divided the stack and slowly gazed at each picture, at all the round, full breasts, annoyed at the amount of actual text in the magazine. We stared and stared, wondering if we would ever have breasts so round and so full, until one of us said, "Isn't it kind of gay for us to look at these pictures?" And none of us wanted the others to think we were gay, so we pretended the magazines were all Erica's idea and made her return them to her father's desk. We didn't plan it while she ran across the hall and back, but when she returned, we all understood what would happen. I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was Annie. Maybe it was Robin. Maybe it was me. "Take it off," one of us said. She looked at us for a moment, as if she didn't know what we were talking about, but she knew. She sat down on her canopy bed and propped the pink pillows behind her back. We gathered at the foot of her bed, sitting on the pink comforter her mother had bought the year before. She reached up and slowly removed a bobby pin. Then, one by one, a pile of bobby pins emerged from her head. She slid off the strawberry blonde wig and held it in her lap. Her head wasn't shiny and bald like a cancer patient or like Annie's father. There were patches of exposed scalp, uneven tufts of hair, and raw red scabs. Now we knew. She had done this to herself. She looked down at the nest of fake hair in her hands, waiting for some sign of understanding from us. "That's disgusting," Robin or Annie or I said. "Put the wig back on." Erica scooped up the bobby pins and went into her bathroom to do as we commanded. When she returned, the wig in place, we were all tucked inside our sleeping bags. We listened as Erica climbed into her bed, underneath the canopy that could not protect her. We heard her soft sobs. Maybe one of us wanted to say we were sorry about what we did, sorry about her mother. Maybe it was Annie who wanted to say something. Maybe it was Robin. Maybe it was me. Instead, we pulled our sleeping bags tight around our chins and pretended to sleep. In the morning, we packed our overnight bags and went outside to where our mothers waited along the street in their station wagons. And when they asked us how it went, we each told them about the Playboy magazines. We said Erica's father kept them all around the house, in the bathroom, on the kitchen counter, by the television. It's as if he wanted us to look at them, we said, allowing our mothers to gather us up and bring us home. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was awesome. 3 very different stories. Well done. Thank you. Well, we normally have a little Q&A now. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Shasta, now would be the time to ask her what's happening. Anyone have a question? Lisa. You're like a hero.
I really did. I wrote about 82,000 words. Yeah.
So what was your daily routine like?
My daily goal was 1,500 words.
And did you do it in the morning or what?
It kind of fluctuated. My routine kept changing. It was really never in the morning, though. But it was never at night either, except I got into this kind of bad routine where I would wait until 5 o'clock happy hour on the porch to start writing. And then there were a couple of days where it was like 8 o'clock before I finally hit my 1,500 words. But usually it was earlier. And then I made myself get out of that habit of drinking and writing. Any other questions? I leave Monday morning and I get home on Wednesday. It's my son's birthday Wednesday. So I'll be like kind of thrust into all that. But my plan is to let the novel sit for a month, and then we're going to go back to Indianapolis for the summer and then to start revising it then. Sure.
Do you think you'd ever do a long residency like this again?
Definitely. Yeah, they're going to have to drag me out of here on Monday.
Follow-up then, which other ones are you thinking about?
I don't know. I haven't even gotten that far yet. I'm so sad about leaving this one that it's really hard to think of going. I don't know. I just have a hard time imagining anywhere else would be as special and wonderful as this.
Don't even look. Have you been to other residencies?
I did 6 weeks at Hedgebrook a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I cried when I left there as well. You better have some tissues Monday morning, Eric, okay? Any other questions? Yeah.
So your question in your last little thing about the fifth grade girls, I found that intriguing, having taught fifth grade. What was your background on that one?
I don't know. It just is one of those rare stories that came like fully formed. I wrote it at the Kenyon Review workshop 2 summers ago, and I was walking around, and it's a generative workshop, so every day we had to write new work to bring in, and I was like, fuck, I don't have anything to take with me tomorrow. And I was walking around, and all of a sudden, just like the entire story came to me. Like I actually sat down like outside and just wrote the whole draft, and it ended up going through a bit of revision, but for the most part, it came like fully formed like that. I really don't know where it came from. I wish I knew. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're not crying yet. That's awesome.
I know.
Well done. Well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I'm okay now to say my thank yous.
Okay.
Just really want to thank everyone, all the board members who made it possible for me to be here and made this such an amazing experience. These 3 months have been incredible. I never thought I could write a novel. I always thought of myself as a short story writer, and I really wanted to use this gift of time to see if I could write a novel, and I did, and I'm just so thankful. So thank you to everyone. It's been amazing.